come on board as my advisor as well. Arun has a very illustrious career, but I didn't need to know all that before I invited him. I invited him on the spot because I was so charmed and taken by his intellectual astuteness and his maturity and the depth that I saw. So he's a Deputy Vice Chancellor of Research and Commercialization at Queensland University of Technology, Australia. So 3 of our speakers have actually flown down from Australia and Europe today to be with us. He has played a leadership role in development of Australian research capability in information and communications technology. He was the co-founder of National ICT Australia, called the NICTA, and was the inaugural director of its largest research laboratory. Prior to NICTA, he was the head of the School of Computer Science and Engineering at the University of New South Wales, where he helped establish the Cooperative Research Centre for Smart Internet Technology. He has held a number of advisory roles both at the federal and state levels. He was a member of the inaugural Advisory Council of the Australian Research Council and served as a member of the Queensland Premier's Smart State Council and as a member of the Premier's Business Roundtable. He has also led the Australia-India Business Council, both at the state and national level. He was awarded the 2010 Premier's Special Award for contribution to building the export profile of Queensland. And he specializes in artificial intelligence, and he's a very deep and crisp researcher. We are extremely privileged to have him on board for his support. I now invite Mr. Arun Sharma to take the stage and enlighten us about his new thesis called the Argument Economy.
As many of you know, Arifa is not someone that can be refused a request that she makes of anyone. I met her at Davos at some dinner I was having with some colleagues, and she overheard and she decided that she needed to talk to me. Next day morning, I tried to fend her off, and next day morning she was persistent again. And then I totally forgot about the meeting. On the last day of Davos, she sends me a selfie with Leanne. Or Leanne sent me the selfie. And Leanne is someone that I have known for a very long time. As Arifa mentioned, she's one of the most amazing people in the blockchain. It is not like blockchain as a possibility or blockchain as a theory. It's blockchain, the reality. And I'm just a preparatory act for Leanne, for Leanne to be here. And obviously, I was quite intrigued by what Arifa was trying to do. And it really looked like an interesting concept. But I also got the sense that she needed the mentorship and guidance of someone who has worked with capital markets, who is a veteran of capital markets, and not many people in the world have sold more software to capital markets than John Patrick, who I knew for a long time. And so my whole idea was, the way I'll get rid of Arifa is by bringing John and Arifa together, and she will leave me alone. That hasn't happened. So here I am. So I said, I don't work in capital markets. I don't, I'm a voyeur of computer science. I used to teach machine learning before it was fashionable, before most of you were born. Then I took a deep dive in blockchain because I was reading about blockchain and Bitcoin, and I found that most people who were writing books about blockchain didn't actually quite understand what it was about. So 2 years ago, I decided to take a deep dive, which being a computer scientist was easy. And then I sort of got some insights about what's happening. And the insights are very simple, that blockchain is one of the most profound developments in computer science. And I would put it perhaps the third most important advance after Alan Turing's the Universal Digital Computer and the TCP/IP protocol for the internet, and third output as the blockchain. And it is important to understand what is happening in the world and where we are heading. And to understand that, we also have to understand some of the hype, and the hype about artificial intelligence. It actually has made amazing progress, but we need to understand exactly what the progress is. And then we see that something like blockchain is coming, and they appear orthogonal to each other. And as we will see, that AI, or the advance in AI, is actually going to begin to slow down. And this is where the interaction between AI and blockchain for a particular reason will become more devastating in its impact. And what it means for jobs, what it means for future of society and economy, is where the ability to deal with ambiguity becomes important. The ability to argue, not the ability to be clever and rational, because that will be automated, but the ability to navigate ambiguity, navigate uncertainty, is what will make and distinguish professionals in the future. So that's artificial intelligence, blockchain, and the argument economy. So you would be living in another planet if you haven't come across one of these headlines almost every day. I don't know whether it is true in India, but in the West we find this headline, 50% of the jobs will disappear, this will happen, that will happen. And if you go really look at it, you find that there is one or two studies that everyone keeps repeating and keeps copying. And it really is not a good representation of what is happening. The recent McKinsey report that actually says that yes, there will be some impact, but what will happen is what most professionals do, certain aspects of what they do will become routine, and certain aspects, new things they will be able to scale up. And we also must understand that it may not be evident in India, but in the Western countries, there is something called demographic inversion happening. That is, there are more older people that will be there. Did you know that China actually has a labor shortage in manufacturing because of the one-child policy? They are having an inversion, and they are investing hugely into robotics because their competitive advantage is not low-cost labor in manufacturing. It is the supply chain that they have mastered. And that is their competitive advantage. And unless they can find workers, which simply aren't there, that's why they're trying. They're hungry for every robotics company in the world so that they can continue to have their supremacy via the supply chain. And so we should always take this with a grain of salt. But let's try to delve a bit deeper into why this is happening. So this is the outline of my talk. The AI that we know is happening because of a very simple thing, and that's Moore's law. And we'll just look very briefly about different shapes of AI. So the reality about AI. Then we will talk about where the jobs of the future are going to come from. And the distinction between products and services is a good way to understand it. Which knowledge-intensive jobs may be safe? And you will be surprised that some jobs may be safe and some jobs may not be safe. What about blockchain? We'll look at that. And the argument economy. And what could it mean for the future? Now, it's not going to be a thesis. And in some way, this actually, the talk is probably in similar philosophical, stance to what Nick Szabo likes to talk about. So I'm not saying I'll ever be a substitute for Nick Szabo, but some of the issues actually are very similar that he talks about. So we all heard of Moore's law, and let me just reiterate, because exponential growth is the most abused term on the planet. When people say there is exponential growth happening, all they mean is linear growth with a high rate. You have no clue how big exponential growth is. This is exponential growth when it doubles. If 2 to the power 3 is 8, 2 to the power 10 is 1024, and 2 to the power 32 is 4.3 billion. That's the kind of exponential growth. How many of you have heard the chess story? The chess story, the story of the chess. So the king, the inventor of chess went to the. So the story was told by Eric Brynjolfsson and McAfee in their famous book, which Ray Kurzweil told about explaining exponentiation. So when the inventor of chess went to the king of Patliputra and showed that this is the game I have invented, the king wanted to reward him. And so said, what do you want? I want some rice. How much rice do you want? Give me 1 on the first cell, 2 on the second cell, keep doubling it. And the king said, make it so. Is that all you want? And by the time they reached cell number 32, it was rice required of a large field. 4.3 billion grains of rice, a few acres of field of rice will produce that. And a few cells down the road, the entire national output was gone. One version of the story is that the king had him killed because he was too smart. But the truth is, unless you get to the second half of the chessboard, you don't see the power of exponentiation. What's happened with computing power, the Moore's law, is that it started doubling every 18 months. beginning in the 1950s, 60s. And year 2006 was the point in time computing power had doubled 32 times. And we are in the second half of the chessboard. And Eric Brionson and Andrew McAfee's book, I recommend that you read it. They've illustrated this very beautifully. So we are in the second half of the chessboard. So what it means is that AI that we know, which is making progress, is called something called weak AI. It is actually about automating a single skill or a few sets of skills, okay? And conceptually, there hasn't been much advanced in the last 2 decades. It's the same algorithms with a little tweaks here and there, deep learning. What has happened is computing power has doubled and doubled and doubled. We are in the second half of the chessboard, and the same algorithm, they are able to be subjected to exponentially more data because we are able to collect more data. So those algorithms have become better, okay? Because there is more data for them, there is more computing power for them. So it's like when I was starting out, like, you know, you had sort of like, you know, the PC, like, you know, Mac Paint used to come, and it was very slow, and suddenly an upgrade came in the hardware, and it became a normal software, okay? So that's exactly what has happened with AI. So the difference between weak AI and the scientific imagination in the science fiction is between strong AI, or artificial general intelligence. And there has been no progress in artificial general intelligence. So I'll give you another example. When I was a graduate student, before many of you were born, 30 years ago, there used to be huge numbers of computer science graduates and PhD students working in computational linguistics and machine translation. And they were trying to solve machine translation by trying to have semantic model, syntactic model, pragmatic model, models of natural language, how the brain processes, and they were not going anywhere. And guess what? When big data became available, Google and others solved this problem by saying, well, almost everything that we want to translate has been translated by professionals, every phrase, if you look at the European Union records or the UN records. So basically, it became a big data problem, and they used the computing power and that big data access to use the machine learning algorithms, and they got 95% reliability in translation. Does it mean that the computer understands? No. All it has done is solve that problem. The AlphaGo is able to win AlphaGo, but it is not able to do anything else. You might make a system that wins AlphaGo, that wins chess, and does machine translation, but you put this system out in the street, you think it will be able to navigate between different things? So this ability to deal with ambiguity, ability to deal with unpredictability is the general intelligence that we have made absolutely no progress in. And the reason why we have made no progress in is because we need advances in cognitive science, neuroscience, and linguistics, and these are not being driven by Moore's law. The third aspect of AI people talk about is singularity. And again, it's a pipe dream. Singularity says one day all this is going to become so big that computers will become more powerful and they will overtake human beings in intelligence. Again, it's a Ray Kurzweil term. And he thinks that the singularity will happen in 40 years. You talk to more serious computer scientists, more serious roboticists, more serious AI experts, and they will tell you that it might be several hundred years away. If you ask me, will it happen? I can tell you that there is no possible impossibility about it not happening. It will probably happen someday, but it's not going to happen in our lifetime or our children's lifetime. It is a long process. Again, we need advances in biomedical engineering, material science, implants, neurosensors, and embedded chips, and these are not progressing with a Moore's law speed. So what does this all mean? What it all means is that the AI that we are talking about is actually about particular skills. No matter how difficult that skill is, if it is one or two skills we are talking about, AI will beat human beings any day. So if your career depends on being very clever, smart, ability to solve a single deep problem, you're gone. Okay? But if your career depends on dealing with ambiguity, dealing with human beings, dealing with emotions, dealing with difficult people, you'll be fine. So let's see where the jobs are created. Okay? Jobs are created in the services economy. The jobs are created in the services economy. So there is so what are services? Well, services are something that are not products. And this is a slightly different definition of products and services because people always confuse about services. A product is something that you can hold in your hand, or something you dig from ground, or something you produce. A service is something that you can't drop on your foot. Anything you can't put in a box and ship. But you can actually do something about it over the internet. People doing something for other people for value is a service. So what's an example of a services firm? A law firm is a services firm. A haircutting company is a services firm. And the difference between services firms and product firms is when you are making products, you get economies of scale. So as your revenue grows, the number of jobs also grows, but doesn't grow very fast. Because you can automate, you can have economies of scale in mining something. But if a law firm's revenue is growing, you can count your bottom dollar that they have got more lawyers. Okay? So for economies, it is better to encourage services firms because as their revenues grow, they employ more people. But every services company wants to become a product company because product companies are more profitable and services companies are more difficult to scale. So there is a product envy. And governments around the world, they like shiny product companies. So Mohandas Park, an accountant in 2017, did an analysis of the effective tax rate for products and services in India. And you'd think that India has benefited so much from the services economy that it will at least have equal playing field so far as taxes is concerned. For services company, the effective taxation rate, according to Mohandas Pai and his colleague, the former sort of CFO of Infosys, is 30%. And for products, the incentives are such that the effective tax rate is 26%. So that's where the taxation is actually against producing more jobs. So what happens over time is AI and robotics is trying to make services companies become more like product companies. So manual labor services, the robot is trying to make it into a product company, and the things that lawyers do, blockchain, smart contract, is trying to make them more into a product. And so the pressure of automation is that it is making services more into product, and the bad news is there will be fewer and fewer jobs if that happens. Okay? So the beauty of the economy is we have to keep creating new services. It means things that only human beings can do. So which knowledge-intensive jobs may be safe? Okay, jobs that deal with ambiguity, complexity and uncertainty, conflict over resources, need to persuade and achieve consensus, interpret less than perfect rules. They all lead to arguments. Okay? Now, think about it. Think about an engineer. If this happens today, an engineer gets their first job based on their technical skills. Okay? Invariably, they will get their first job based on their technical skills. But who are the engineers who actually get promoted? They're the ones who can work with the clients. They're the ones who can work with local government authorities to get the approvals that are needed. They're the ones who are able to deal with ambiguity. They're the ones who keep getting promoted. So there are enough signals in the economy that as you go into any profession, your entry was based on how clever you were, how rational you are, but a different kind of cleverness is needed. The cleverness to deal with ambiguity. So when I was sort of thinking about these things, I was talking about this to Rod Brooks. I don't know, how many of you have heard of Rod Brooks? Rod Brooks is the world's leading robotics expert. He was a professor of MIT. He's the guy who founded Roomba, the vacuum cleaning robot. He was the guy whose robots went to Mars. He was the guy whose robots went after 9/11 in Afghanistan. And he's also the guy who founded the company Rethink Robotics, which is revolutionizing manufacturing with the Baxter platform. He said, you know what? This sounds very familiar. Then he sent me a little blog that Nick Szabo had done in 2008 about wet code and dry code. So dry code is things that computers can understand, and wet code is something that only humans can interpret. So the argument economy is actually more about wet code than actually about dry code. So, provided there is enough ambiguity, jobs are safe, because the progress in AI has only been on weak AI and narrow AI. If it is strong AI progress, then all bets are off, and I'll come to that later. So, for the time being, because Moore's law is slowing down, at least for silicon, we are going to have a Moore's law winter, because we are almost approaching 7 nanometers of the distance that is required, and by mid-2022 or 2023, we expect to get to 5 nanometers. And people will still figure out what to do, and they will still get, but Moore's law is slowly and slowly slowing down. So weak AI will also start slowing down. But it doesn't mean that Moore's law will stop forever. It's the silicon-based Moore's law that stops, and then people have to invest in gallium arsenide or other photonic chips and everything. Moore's law, according to an MIT physics professor, has 200 years to run, but not necessarily with silicon. But there will be a AI winter if there is a Moore's law winter. So that should be good, because AI will slow down a bit. But something threatens to take ambiguity away, and that is blockchain. Blockchain is about taking ambiguity away. Now, I'm not going to explain to you what blockchain is. Normally I do when I talk to speakers, but after the whole day of blockchain, I will not talk about blockchain. It's immune to tampering. It means it takes ambiguity away. Integrity verification of transactions without a trusted intermediary, there is less ambiguity because of that. It's an internet of value, and we have talked about that. Like, internet allowed us to transfer files without a central routing system. But it doesn't work for value or money, because if I send you the file, you still have the file. So the genius of Satoshi Nakamoto was to come up with a TCP/IP-like protocol for transfer of value. That's what the blockchain gives you. Smart contracts take ambiguity away. Okay? And so some of those low-level legal jobs will disappear. Audit will disappear, we have talked about it, because there is a lot of ambiguity involved. Why do we have tax lawyers? Because the tax code is never perfect. So we need human beings to interpret in some way within a certain framework, and that's why those jobs are there. As they become more dry code, those jobs will disappear. And of course, we talk about distributed autonomous enterprises, and you all know what it is. But there are some fundamental things about blockchain. Why blockchain could actually be more detrimental for jobs than AI is because of this. While blockchain takes advantage of all the advances that have happened because of Moore's law, if you understand blockchain extremely well, blockchain does not depend on Moore's law continuing. Okay? Blockchain does not depend on Moore's law continuing. If Moore's law totally stopped there, blockchain will be happy as it is. Although, if you want to scale up blockchain, then you need more computers and more power and everything. But if Moore's law continues, then at least the proof of work-based blockchain becomes bad for the planet because it becomes energy intensive. And the third insight is proof of work-based blockchain may actually become one of the biggest drivers of Moore's law. As the value of Bitcoin goes up, some of the biggest drivers of ASIC, application-specific integrated circuits, is actually the blockchain applications. Now, this is actually a more nuanced argument. It appears like that. See, whenever Moore's law has gone, it has gone in fits and starts. So what happens is, suddenly Intel will come up with a new processing chip. And then it will take 2-3 years for the software systems to optimize to catch up. Okay? Before it used to be the defense application, then it became the computer games design. And so they will come up with a new chip, and then for 2 years, the software will try to optimize it. And then they will hit the bottleneck, and then they will come up with another chip. Guess what happens in Bitcoin mining? There's nothing to optimize. The mining's, the proof of work checking is as simple an algorithm as it can get. There's nothing to optimize. You can't optimize that if you understand how the Bitcoin thing works. It is the most direct signal for processing power as the Bitcoin value goes up. And these are some of the fundamental facts about blockchain that actually put it orthogonal to AI. So, but the other fact is, blockchain can make AI more effective. Now, AI doesn't work very well, as we know now, with ambiguity. But if the entire business world moves to a blockchain platform, a lot of the ambiguity goes away. And the AI algorithms will become more effective because there is less ambiguity. So the AI algorithms, without Moore's law continuing, will actually be more effective for a longer period of time. And that is bad news for jobs, especially professional services jobs. And that's something that we all have to be conscious of. How do we understand that this is actually happening? So there are two ways to think about it. What blockchain is a progression of digitalization. So when the business world started moving to computers, what we did, we took ledgers, we took all the information, and we put it in a database so that the computer programs could work on it. The next phase was something like the Internet of Things. Okay, we were able to sense data about the physical world, and then there was a virtual setting of the physical world on which we could apply algorithms. Blockchain is the next level of digitalization, where concepts, higher order concepts like ownership, integrity, like smart contracts and agreements are actually virtualized. And so that's another level of digitalization. So think of AI working on a blockchain platform and AI working on a non-blockchain platform as driving a train on a guided rail or driving your car in full-blown Mumbai traffic. Which one is easier? Driving a train or driving a car in full-blown Mumbai traffic with lots of ambiguity? Which one is easier? Okay? So AI on a blockchain platform will give us so much efficiency, but it will be a killer of jobs. So the combination of blockchain and weak AI looks like a perfect storm. But there is hope. Why there is hope? It's because of who we are.
What is your opinion regarding decentralized intelligence?
Decentralized intelligence is inevitable because centralized intelligence by its very nature is going to be so complex in terms of computational complexity. See, when people talk about blockchain, yes, it takes the central intermediary away, but it is not about taking all trust away. It takes the intermediary away, but it pushes the need for trust to the edges of the system. Okay, so who is entering data into the system? There is still a level of ambiguity, and you have to trust that. So there is some theories people say that it will make the community-based economies thrive because everything at a national level or a state level is disintermediated, but still you need some level of trust, and some level of trust in a village, everyone knows everyone. So they will be worried about putting the wrong data because you can be found out. So at some level that consensus, so what technologies like distributed ledger technology do is they don't completely remove the need for trust. They actually migrate trust on the edges where it is easier to manage because people can't hide in their communities. Okay.
And one more question. Sure. What areas do you think blockchain plus AI in future?
The business world will be disrupted. The business world will be disrupted. Manufacturing will be disrupted. Manufacturers are the biggest middlemen on the planet. With 3D printing happening, the value will shift to the designers, and the value will shift to the producers of raw material, where it actually converts into powder. So you basically, countries will be exporting powders. People will have 3D printers, or communities will have 3D printers, and companies like HP that sell 3D printers will become like the Apple. And then designers, the manufacturers that are clever will become designers whose designs are being used to print. And blockchain will allow people to track this. Okay? So the entire world of manufacturing will be disrupted. And this is actually an advance, not just in blockchain, but will be advanced in material science and 3D printing. It is the disruption is going to come not by one technology, but how AI, blockchain, material science, 3D printing, they all are interacting with each other. And that's what people call the fourth industrial revolution.
Thank you. Sir, firstly, thank you very much for the informative talk. You mentioned AI has three components. One is computational power, second is algorithms, and third is data.
No, I didn't say it has three components. What I said is that the performance of current AI systems can be attributed to three things.
Yeah.
Like, and it's not me saying, there are AI researchers who say it. And you can say 1/3 of it is because the algorithms have improved. 1/3 of it is because of the computing power doubling and Moore's law. And the 1/3 is because there is more data available that we collect. And those algorithms with more data actually become more effective.